there, my name is Shade, and today we're going to talk about some scary and very disturbing disappearances. I am super excited to talk about these because they're just very strange, weird, and just overall terrifying. So, yeah, let's get into it. The disappearance of Dennis Lloyd Martin in 1969 is actually one of the most terrifying cases ever, and it's also one of the more popular ones. 6-year-old Dennis Lloyd Martin was last seen on a meadow called Spence Field just off the Appalachian Trail in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on June 14, 1969. He vanished without a trace while playing a game with other kids and was never found despite the largest search operation in the park's history. Dennis, his older brother Douglas, and 2 other boys were playing while their father and several other adults were sitting together watching the kids. The boys decided to sneak up on the adults to scare them. Shortly after, the 3 boys who went south jumped out of the bush in an attempt to scare the adults who pretended to be caught off guard by the kids. They all assumed that Dennis would shortly jump out from the northwest, attempting a scare of his own, but after a few minutes passed by, his father Bill Martin grew concerned. After 2 to 3 minutes, but no more than 5, Bill began asking where Dennis could be, and the families began searching for him. Dennis would never be seen again. The park ranger and author Dwight McCarter wrote about the search and explained that the day after Dennis disappeared, it rained heavily. So just as a bit of a background information, Dwight McCarter was a ranger for 30 years. He searched for those who were lost in the mountains, and he found and rescued many of them. Dwight was also a gifted storyteller, tour guide, and naturalist. Even at 75, he could hike 30 miles with ease. Park rangers, Boy Scouts, volunteers, and even the military spent 92 days looking for Dennis. So overall, over 1,000 people were looking through over 56 square miles of forest. So 56 square miles is a huge space. It's bigger than San Francisco, which is about 47 square miles, or even Miami, which is 36 square miles. And they still weren't able to find him. So yeah, that part is super sad, and you definitely could say that they tried the best they could, and they really used all the resources they could have used, and yeah, I wish we would one day find out what happened to Dennis. Jared Michael Negretti is a missing person who was last seen on July 19, 1991 during a Boy Scouts camping trip. Search personnel recovered some of his personal items, including a camera and food wrappers, during an extensive search of the area that lasted 16 days. The camera contained the last known photo of Jared, showing his eyes and nose, taken after his disappearance, which is the scariest part about this. Okay, so now about the actual disappearance. On July 18, 1991, Jared went with 5 fellow Boy Scouts and a troop leader on a camping trip, his first overnight backpacking trip. And the next day, on the trail to the summit of Mount San Gorgonio or Giorgio, I don't know how to pronounce it, but anyways, Jared had trouble keeping up with the other scouts due to lack of experience with hiking, and the scout troop decided to hike ahead of Jared at a faster pace, leaving him behind. Which, I just have to say, that's so irresponsible. I don't know why you would leave a kid that's only 12 years old behind like that. You should always just go as fast as your slowest team member, in my opinion, but yeah. He got separated from his group, and other hikers and witnesses later reported that he was seen taking shortcuts in the switchback sections, which led to speculation that he possibly fell down the mountainside or took a wrong trail and got lost. It was reported that the scout troop leader interacted with hikers who expressed concern for Jared. He told them that he would check on his scout on the way back down the summit with the rest of the troop. Jared was last seen at 6 p.m. by another hiker, a Santa Ana firefighter, who warned him about staying from the trail and told him to stay on a marked path. He was last seen wearing green Boy Scout pants with a tan-colored t-shirt, possibly a Boy Scout-style t-shirt, and with black high-top tennis shoes. The scout leader conducted a search for Jared before hiking 12 miles in darkness to report his disappearance that night. And I don't know, to me it doesn't sound like there's any crazy story or theory behind his disappearance. I think sadly Jared was neglected by the other scouts and by his troop leader, who didn't pay attention to him falling behind so much, and Yeah, I don't think we'll ever be able to find out what exactly happened, but that most definitely was the reason for him disappearing. October 14th, 2006, in Crater Lake, Oregon, 8-year-old Samuel Boke and his dad, Kenneth, stopped to play a game of hide and seek with darkness approaching before they returned to their cabin near Diamond Lake. Samuel saw a spot of yellow on a hill and thought it was gold and ran over to it. His dad called for Samuel and went to his car, but Samuel did not come, refusing to leave the spot of yellow. Kenneth ran over to him, and Samuel took off up to the hill. His dad said, "I never caught up with him, and at that point he disappeared over the top somewhere and I lost him." Samuel disappeared within seconds with his dad right behind him. Note that Samuel had on a blue winter coat, which would be easily visible. The search began shortly after Samuel was last seen, with 200 searchers, including dogs, helicopters, and heat-sensing cameras. And they looked through 6 square miles for 1 week before the search was called off, when no trace of Samuel was found. And yeah, still 12 years later, there has been no trace of Samuel, though he is likely deceased because an 8-year-old boy couldn't survive in that climate. So yeah, that one's really, really weird. Next, we will get into the case of Stacy Ann Aris, and Stacy was last seen while visiting Yosemite National Park with her father and 6 others on July 27th, 1981. The group reached a cluster of cabins designed for overnight stay at Sunrise High Sierra Camp, tied up their horses, and went indoors to freshen up. Stacy changed clothes and left the cabin carrying her camera so she could photograph the lake. Stacy invited her father to join her as well, but he declined, and an elderly man from their group went with her instead. They went downhill towards the lake, and the rest of the group watched them from above. They saw Stacy's companion sit down. Stacy walked further on towards the lake, went behind some trees, and disappeared from sight. After a few minutes, when she didn't return, the other members of the group went to look for her. An extensive search of the park involving helicopters, dogs, and dozens of volunteers turned up no indication of Stacy's whereabouts. The only trace ever found of her was the lens of her camera around the tree line area where she was last seen. She lived in Saratoga, California in 1981, and till today, she's not been found. On June 24th, 2006, 47-year-old Gilbert Mark Gilman of Olympia, Washington, drove to the staircase area of Olympic National Park for what appeared to be a routine day hike. A park ranger later reported speaking with him that day, noting that Gilman was carrying only a camera and no backpack or overnight gear. When he failed to meet a coworker for a scheduled business trip, concern quickly grew. The following day, his silver Ford Thunderbird was discovered parked at the staircase trailhead, prompting an extensive search of the surrounding wilderness. For nearly 10 days, search teams combed the rugged terrain using ground crews and other search resources, but despite their efforts, they found no trace of Gilbert Gilman. His camera, clothing, and every other personal belonging simply vanished along with him, leaving investigators with few clues and a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Alright, and one of the strangest missing person cases ever reported is that of Stephen Kubacki. This one is actually not fully a missing person case because he was found. It's just a very eerie story. So yeah, we will get into that now. On February 20th, 1978, the 23-year-old college student set out alone on a cross-country ski trip near the shores of Lake Michigan. When he failed to return home, an extensive search was launched. Searchers discovered his skis and ski poles abandoned near the frozen shoreline, and a single set of footprints appeared to lead out onto the ice. The tracks continued for a distance before suddenly ending, with no footprints leading back. Investigators feared that Kubacki had fallen through the ice and drowned, despite the fact that repeated searches of the lake failed to recover his body. For the next 15 months, Stephen Kubacki was presumed dead. Then, in May 1979, the mystery took an astonishing turn. Kubacki suddenly reappeared in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, more than 700 miles from where he had disappeared. According to his own account, he awoke lying in a field wearing clothes that were not his own and carrying a backpack containing maps and other items he didn't recognize. Even more remarkably, he claimed to have no memory of the previous 15 months. The last thing he remembered was setting out on his ski trip in Michigan. Authorities investigated his story but found no evidence that he had been the victim of a crime. There was also no proof that he had intentionally staged his disappearance. In the years that followed, Kubaki went on to complete graduate school, earn a doctorate in psychology, and build a professional career, largely avoiding the spotlight. To this day, no definite explanation has ever emerged for where he was during those missing 15 months. Some have suggested dissociative fugue, a rare psychological condition involving memory loss and unexpected travel, while others have proposed far more extraordinary theories. Whatever the truth may be, Stephen Kubaki's disappearance remains one of the most unusual and enduring missing person mysteries ever documented. And FYI, a lot of people think he was abducted by aliens. Obviously there is no proof for that, but I think it's an interesting theory, and yeah, I don't know what to think about this, but it's pretty interesting either way, and I'm just glad that he was found, even though it was 15 months later. On March 14, 2014, 39-year-old Dr. James McGrogan, an emergency physician from Indiana, set out on a backcountry snowshoe trip near Vail, Colorado, with a group of friends. Their destination was the Eisman Hut, a remote mountain cabin accessible only by traveling several miles through rugged alpine terrain. At one point during the hike, McGrogan moved ahead of the group. When the others arrived at the hut, they realized he had never made it and immediately alerted authorities. An extensive search involving helicopters, search and rescue teams, avalanche dogs, and dozens of volunteers combed the snow-covered mountains for days. Despite ideal search conditions in many areas, there was no sign of McGrogan. Then, nearly 3 weeks after he disappeared, searchers discovered his body approximately 4.5 miles from the established route in steep, remote terrain. He was still wearing his helmet, but his coat, gloves, and snowboard boots were missing and were never recovered. His snowboard and backpack were found nearby, and his cell phone was still inside the pack. The unusual circumstances surrounding the discovery fueled widespread speculation online, with some pointing to the missing clothing and the fact that he was found far from the intended route. However, investigators found no evidence of foul play. The Eagle County coroner concluded that McGrogan had died from injuries sustained in a fall, including severe blunt force trauma, and ruled his death an accident. Experts have suggested that after becoming disoriented and leaving the trail, he likely fell into the rugged backcountry where the combination of serious injuries and freezing temperatures proved fatal. While many questions remain about exactly how he became lost, the official investigation found no evidence of anything beyond a tragic accident in one of Colorado's most unforgiving mountain environments. On October 2, 1999, the 3-year-old Jared Atadero disappeared while hiking on the Big South Trail in Colorado's Roosevelt National Forest, in what would become one of the state's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Jared had been allowed to join a Christian social group on what his father believed would be a simple trip to a nearby fish hatchery. Instead, the group decided to take an unplanned hike into the mountains. Which honestly is already a bad idea. Why does the dad not know about this? But anyways, at some point along the trail, the hikers became separated into smaller groups, and Jared ran ahead. 2 fishermen later told investigators they briefly spoke with the young boy as he walked alone on the trail. Believing the adults they had seen further back were with him, they watched him continue up the path. It was the last confirmed sighting of Jared alive. Not long afterward, members of the hiking group reported hearing a scream echo through the canyon, but when they searched the area, the little boy had vanished without a trace. An enormous search operation followed, involving hundreds of volunteers, search and rescue teams, tracking dogs, and helicopters. The effort was complicated when one of the search helicopters crashed and seriously injured everyone on board. Despite days of searching, no sign of Jared was found. Nearly 4 years later, in May 2003, hikers discovered partial skeletal remains, fragments of his clothing, and the small sneakers he had been wearing on the day he disappeared, high on a steep mountainside, far from where many believed a 3-year-old could have traveled alone. DNA testing confirmed the remains belonged to Jared. Exactly what happened to him remains unknown. Some investigators have suggested he may have been attacked by a mountain lion after wandering away from the trail, while others argue that the condition of his clothing and the location of his remains don't perfectly match a typical animal attack. I believe I believe his clothing was found inside out, which is really strange, almost as if it was taken off. I don't think an animal would do that, but alternative theories, including accidental death or abduction, have also been proposed over the years, but none have ever been proven. Because the available evidence has never pointed conclusively to a single explanation, Jared Atidero's case remains officially unsolved and continues to be one of the most debated wilderness disappearances and mysteries in the United States. In November 2014, 47-year-old hiker Kenny Veach vanished in the Nevada desert after setting out alone in search of a place he had described online as a mysterious M-shaped cave. As an experienced outdoorsman who frequently explored the mountains near Las Vegas, Veach had posted on YouTube weeks earlier claiming he had stumbled upon an unusual cave during a previous hike. According to his account, the cave's entrance resembled the letter M. And as he approached it, he was overwhelmed by an intense feeling of fear and an unexplained vibration that convinced him to turn around. His story quickly gained attention, with many viewers urging him to return and document the cave on camera. Why would you do that? If you feel... Oh my god, okay. Anyways. Determined to find it again, Veach set out on November 10th, carrying a camera and recording parts of his hike. When he failed to return home, his girlfriend reported him missing. Search and rescue teams, along with volunteers, spent days combing the remote desert landscape. Investigators eventually recovered his cell phone near the route he had taken, but there were no signs of Kenny himself. Despite extensive searches, no clothing, equipment, or human remains were ever found. As news of his disappearance spread, the mysterious cave became the focus of intense speculation. Some suggested that the cave concealed abandoned mines, secret military activity, or even paranormal phenomena. Others believed the entire story was simply an exaggeration that took on a life of its own after Veach disappeared. To date, no verified evidence has confirmed that the M-shaped cave was ever found or that it had anything to do with his disappearance. The official explanation remains unknown, and many investigators believe that most likely he suffered an accident in the unforgiving desert terrain. Even so, the combination of his final online posts, the missing cave, and the complete lack of physical evidence has made Kenny Veach's disappearance one of the internet's most enduring wilderness mysteries. On June 24, 2010, 66-year-old William Owasco traveled to California's Joshua Tree National Park for what was expected to be a routine day hike. As an experienced outdoorsman, Owasco parked his car near the Juniper Flats area and set out alone into the desert. When he failed to return, park officials launched an extensive search involving helicopters, search and rescue teams, tracking dogs, and volunteers. Despite covering hundreds of miles of rugged terrain, investigators found no sign of him. His backpack, clothing, and other personal belongings were never recovered, leaving almost no clues as to what had happened. For years, Owasco's disappearance remained one of Joshua Tree's most perplexing mysteries. Then, more than a decade later, independent researcher Tom Mahout began re-examining the case using search records, satellite imagery, topographic maps, and GPS data. His detailed analysis suggested that Owasco may have traveled in a direction that searchers had largely overlooked, eventually becoming trapped in some of the park's steep rocky canyons. Mahout's work challenged long-held assumptions about where Owasco had gone and demonstrated how even massive search operations can miss someone in vast, unforgiving wilderness. In 2024, nearly 14 years after William Owasco disappeared, searchers located human remains in a remote section of Joshua Tree National Park. DNA testing later confirmed they belonged to Owasco, bringing a measure of closure to his family after years of uncertainty. On February 24, 1978, 5 men from Yuba County, California, disappeared after attending a basketball game in Chico. The group, Jack Madruga, 30, William Sterling, 29, Theodore Weiher, 32, and brothers Gary Matthias, 25, and Jack Hewitt, 24, were known as friendly local men who regularly spent time together. After the game, they were expected to return home, but they never arrived. Their families became concerned when the men's car was discovered abandoned high in the Plumas National Forest, near 70 miles away from where they should have been. The discovery of the vehicle only raised more questions. The car was found on a remote mountain road, stuck in deep snow, but it was not damaged and still had plenty of fuel. Inside were personal belongings, including clothing and money. The strange location suggested the group had intentionally driven into the mountains, but no clear reason for doing so was ever discovered. Search teams immediately began looking for the 5 men, but the harsh winter conditions made the operation extremely difficult. Nearly 4 months later, in June 1978, a camper discovered the remains of Theodore Weiher inside an abandoned Forest Service trailer, more than 19 miles from where the car had been found. Weiher had been wrapped in several layers of clothing and blankets, suggesting he had tried to survive the freezing conditions. Investigators also found evidence that someone had been inside the trailer and had access to food and supplies, yet Weiher had died despite having resources nearby. The remains of Jack Hewitt were later found in the surrounding area, but Gary Matthias was never located. The biggest mystery remains what caused 5 men to drive into the mountains that night and why they separated after arriving there. Some believe they became lost, while others have suggested foul play or that Gary Matthias, who had a history of mental health issues, may have played a role in the events. However, no theory has ever been proven. More than 4 decades later, the Yuba County 5 case remains one of America's most disturbing wilderness mysteries. A story of a simple drive home that ended with 5 lives forever changed and questions that may never be answered. And thank you so much for listening. Those were really interesting and eerie, and I hope one day I can maybe make a much longer video about these missing person cases. They are so interesting to me and yeah, just strange. So if you like the video, leave a like and leave a comment and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time.